Good afternoon. I am glad that y'all could join us this afternoon. We have some great information that's going to be presented today by Dr. Lucy Cannon, and she is one of our members here at Snellville. Wonderful lady. She is married to Eli, who's sitting back here. Wonderful gentleman as well. All right, But Dr. Lucy Cannon started this last year. Last year was the first year that she did one of these addiction workshops. We're grateful for her for bringing that up, to bringing that need to us, because it is definitely something that's a need. We have so many people in the community and all over that are affected by drug and alcohol abuse and addiction. And as Harold said in an interview this last Thursday that he did, there's no one it doesn't touch. There's no one that's not affected in some way or doesn't know someone that's been affected by it. And so it's a really important thing. It's an important thing that we talk about it. It's an important thing that we share information so that people know how to handle it and deal with it, especially with young people. So we appreciate her. Dr. Lucy Cannon, she is a licensed therapist and works with mental health. And so she knows her stuff. And so she's going to share that with us today. So I'm not going to take any more of her time, and I'm going to let her come up here and do what she came here to do. So thank you, Lucy, and I'm going to hand it over to her.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I'm going to talk like this, y'all. I want to say, first of all, welcome. I'm so glad that you all came out to be with us today to share some knowledge that I know you talked with Harold and some other folks, leadership, and I think those who came last year hopefully found the information to be very helpful, because we are indeed in an addiction age. If we're not addicted to drugs, we're addicted to internet, we're addicted to gambling, we're addicted to pornography, great deal of addiction. And the problem with addictions is they come from somewhere, and many times they come from, genetics. Sometimes people have a bad accident and they don't know how to cope. Sometimes they get in with prescription drugs and all of those things that lead to an addiction. So I'm particularly happy to present again on the topic communities talking. And this time around, we're going to talk about what parents need to know and how to have the conversation with our children. And I think Harold said it this morning. I really appreciate him and all that he's doing. And special thanks to Josh for coordinating all of this. Josh, we love you, we appreciate you, and your zealousness in us being here today. But when we talk about addiction, we're talking about all of us. Now, I don't know about you, but in my family, we got some folks that drank too much. I'm being very transparent here. I had a father whom I loved very much, but he drank too much on the weekends. And he just wasn't the nicest guy. Thank God when he was about 40, 42 years old, he became a member of the Lord's church, and the blessing was he died in the Lord's work and changed so much in his life. And many of us who deal with addiction or have family members, and sometimes in the workplace even, some people don't ever move past the addiction. So today, sit back, relax. We're gonna get into update you all about just addictions, about some of the problems with the signs and symptoms, and we have a really special treat. About at 2:30, I'm gonna pause wherever am I at, because we have a panelist. Yes, some of our fine young men and women, young men and women. 4 of our panelists are gonna come up, and I'm gonna talk with them about what their thoughts are about drugs, what they're seeing in the school, and we're going to ask them to give parents advice. Kids do have a lot of knowledge, and they can share a lot. So I want to say special thanks to them, and I'll introduce them a little later. And then, of course, we'll finish the day off talking about, let's have that talk and just some do's and don'ts. And we also have a handout that we're going to share with you too, of 5 goals of you need to have in mind when you sit down to talk with your children, or we talk with our children. So given that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and I'm going to attempt to balance all of this. We have a movie star in the room. You all probably He was singing earlier. Anybody know I'm talking about the movie star in this room that was singing earlier? Name began with an H. Last name S. Has an Harold Savage. What's been really interesting on this journey of community education and awareness, because so much began with educating people on what symptoms are out there, what type of drugs kids, adults are affected by, all of that. And Miss Lori Wilson, who is anchor with WSB News, came out on Thursday, and we had the privilege of her interviewing Harold, and Harold did not pay me to say this, but he did a fantastic job, and there were times we got a little tearful, but me and Harold got through it. But it was just great hearing from the perspective of our leadership and from our minister, the problems that he sees as they relate to drugs, not only in his own family, but in our community as a whole. And I think he summed it up real well. We all have people who have problems with drugs. Now, it might not be in your immediate family, but you go back in history a little bit more, intergenerational. You know, it's just a problem that's plagued our lives since the beginning of time. And so Lori Wilson came out. Lori was unable to come out, but she arranged for us to do an interview about this particular workshop, and it's about addiction and drug awareness. And we also had Joel, and many of you all know Joel. His lovely wife is in the audience. I'm so glad she's here. Wave at everybody. Thank you. Joel couldn't be here with us, but Harold, Joel, and yours truly, myself, we got a chance to respond to questions around addiction. And the good news is it is going to be aired on Channel 2 News. I spoke with Lori a couple of days ago, and we should be getting that link, and we're going to make sure we get it to the leadership, and we're going to make sure we're going to post it on our website. And people will know the good work we're doing here, that we're taking the lead in the problems in our community, as we do many other needs. So that would certainly be, this is our first time doing a television show. We're excited about it, and we hope to certainly do more of those. So just wanted to give you that announcement. And if you want to know more about Lori Wilson, she is an Emmy Award-winning anchor. And I put her, if you could tell there, I put her website up there, and she has done some amazing work. She's interviewed people all over the country, and just has done a great deal of educating us in our community. But anyway, if you want to know more about it, she also has written a children's book, and among other things. But check her out. She does a lot of great things. Because my hope is that she'll come back again and do some additional work with us. So when we look at what we're going to talk about today, it's important, before parents can have the talk with their children, we've got to get some education, right? We've got to figure out, what type of drugs we're talking about. We talk about primarily preteen, teenagers, and young adults, because that's our target population for these trainings. And so we're going to look at the gateway drugs, and we're going to also look at polysubstance use and how it impacts the world of fentanyl. How many people have heard the word fentanyl? How many people? Yeah. How many people have heard how deadly it is? Yeah, thank you. So because fentanyl is really moving more in the forefront of my work as an addiction counselor, I do mental health and addiction, it's imperative that we educate ourselves, because so much of fentanyl is being mixed with marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, and because we don't know does not help anything. We've got to get to the point that we learn and be able to identify something, because sometimes it's our children, sometimes it's our relatives, sometimes it's our neighbor, sometimes it's in the school system. And so it's very, very important that we know how this most potent, deadly drug is impacting all of the different drugs out there. And kind of what sounded simple, what to look for. And I have a video I'm going to show you all a little bit later about fentanyl, and I think you'll find it to be very educational, because again, this fentanyl is being utilized in even elementary schools. And gummy bears, they're taking, and kids love gummy bears, and they're housing these types of drugs in candy that looks so tasteful, but it's actually drugs. So we need to know what we're looking at, very important. And then the second part of this is, how do we begin to have the conversation with our children? I know last year when we did this training, one person came up and said, I really appreciate this information, but I don't know how to start. And I really appreciated that. So the goal today is to not only have the conversation, but also do follow-up. Because you can't have the one conversation and don't ever, respond back. Our children and teens go through so much. They witness so much violence. They deal with so much. With the internet world, they really, really have a lot of decisions around them to make. And we want our kids not to use drugs. And this message today is we don't want our kids to use drugs. We don't even want them to experiment. Because sometime in that experimental stage, people get a hold of a bad dose and they die. So drugs are very, very deadly. And then we're going to look at bringing our panelists up, and we're going to find out what their perspectives are about drugs at their various schools. These young people are so brave, and I am so proud that they're going to come up and share their stories. And certainly I have some questions I want them to respond to. And then we'll move toward, after the panelists, then we'll move toward looking at what type of resources we need in the event we have someone or a loved one who is battling or starting to use drugs. Because even in the experimental stage of drugs, we need to make sure that, we're educating folks and letting them know the physical, what's going on in the brain, the psychological, what's going on with behavior. And believe you me, these young people, you could really tell a difference when they start using drugs. I've seen it so much in my career. And I wanted to, before we delve into all of the symptoms, I wanted to talk a little bit about the organization that really fund this program and support this program, and it's called Community Talks. And the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, this is the second year they're overall sponsoring us. And usually, once we do our event, they get very excited about what we did and what was the outcome and how we're going to keep this thing going. And we did write up last year's events, and it did get published in SAMHSA, which is the federal government major funding source for substance abuse and mental health services. So we are out there as being a community leader, and as we look at the war on drugs. And it's important that when we look at this talk with parents, please know that it's difficult to know everything to say. You know what I mean? Because we know our children, right? But we got to make sure when we're talking to our kids about drugs that we have some education. We got to know what we're talking about, and keep in mind they're getting an education from their peers and everybody around them. And the goal of parents being involved, because parents will give more factual information. I struggle when I see adolescent teenagers trying to tell another kid about alcoholism. And I'm not saying they don't know some things about it, but being educated, getting trained, doing some research on it allows us to give our kids honest, accurate information. Because if the information is wrong, it's going to lead to them ending up oftentimes in some bad situations. So we're gonna look at how drugs are abused. We talk about alcoholism, and alcoholism, yes, it is. It still continues to be the number one drug that kids use, teenagers use. But right second place is nicotine and marijuana. Marijuana has changed so much over the years. When marijuana came out years ago, 50s, 60s, it was grown in the field, it still is. And it didn't have nearly as much damage as the new synthetic marijuana, where it is actually made in a lab and all kinds of dangerous chemicals are being put in the marijuana. And people who are using the synthetic marijuana, when they come to us, it looks like they have a mental illness. They are very delusional, they're hallucinating, they're having a lot of difficulty with memory, maintaining their jobs. And believe you me, with our kids, with their young developing brains, it's even more dangerous because it affects our kids so much in their decision making, that prefrontal lobe, brain power there. When kids are using drugs, it really does cause some damage. And sometimes, depending on how long kids use drugs, it could get worse. So with that said, I want to keep it moving. And just to show you that SAMHSA really are very much as a federal government program, this is the fine group of folks who actually work on this committee. And I want you all to look at the age group there. They look like, what 7th, 8th graders, 9th graders, maybe 10th graders. Nice cultural group there. But this is the team that worked very closely with the professionals to help them with developing the language and helping them understand what's going on from a teenager perspective. And I'm just so glad that they're there to help us with the stuff that we miss as adults. So I wanted to read this statement because I think it says a lot. The plan, let's talk, and it says, I've always felt that you need, let me start over. I always felt that you need to plan ahead for teen years. Anybody agree with that? You need to plan ahead for teen years. How many of us plan ahead for teen years? We just walk into it, don't we? And we do the best we can with it. And this particular author said you can't all of a sudden expect your children to open up to you about different situations if you don't have a good rapport established. If you're not talking or we're not talking to our kids when their toddlers up, when they recognize parents in their roles, it's going to be very difficult when they become teenagers, pre-teenagers. Because at that age we know so much is going on developmentally. We know that they're very much into their peers. They want to fit in, and they want to move toward this thing called autonomy, being able to be their own independent person. But they want your money, right? They want to make decisions, but they want your money to do the things they want to do, and that's okay. We have to stay with them throughout their middle school years, their adult years, no matter how much they think they know. They do know a lot, but they still need parents to guide and direct where needed. Very, very important. So these are the gateway drugs, and we're going to talk in a minute about gateway drugs. And again, just for the sake of us knowing about this training day, we're going to be talking about alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine. And I'll touch lightly upon prescription drugs because we know the opioid epidemic has been, for the last 6 to 7 years, has really, we've lost a lot of lives as a result of overdosing on prescription medications. And many times with the prescription medication, it started with someone having a physical injury. And of course, they get used to Oxycontin and all these hydrocodone, all these high-powered narcotic drugs. And after a while, the body, it doesn't do anything for the pain or the feelings, so they move on many times from prescription drugs to heroin. And heroin, of course, we know is just very, very deadly, has a lot of damage around just the brains and the function of the brains, and certainly when addictions are not treated, it leads to a lot of problems with family, work, relationships, and of course over a period of time can certainly lead into medical problems. So key thing is to remember alcohol continues to be the number one, marijuana, and smoking cigarettes. Anybody remember when you were in your teens, what was kids doing, I'm gonna say 25 years ago, when they were teenagers? I saw a hand back there. What do you think they were doing? You don't know, do you? All right, parents, what do y'all think kids were doing 25 years ago when it came to experimenting with drugs? Smoking, that's what I saw. And smoking was such a big, popular thing. Anybody remember Joe Campbell, the cool? Man, was he a cool Campbell. I mean, I wanted to be friends with him. I thought he was so cool. And I can remember being 18, and anybody remember Virginia Slim? I'm really dating myself here. Woo. Yeah, I was about 3 years old. No, it wasn't. But I remember being 18 years old, and I'm an adult, so I thought. And they had this great advertisement about women smoking Virginia Sims. They were a long, kind of dark brown cigarette. And it just symbolized a successful woman because they had all these women, very, classy, career-minded women. And that's, of course, who I wanted to be. And so I, thought I would experiment. And I thought it was really cool if you could smoke and the smoke come out through your nose. That's gross today, right? So I tried this cigarette, right? And not knowing it, but I swallowed the smoke, and you all can imagine. I mean, I was coughing, my eyes got red, I looked, because it was very scary. Because you don't swallow smoke, right? It never came out of my nose. So the thing is, cigarette smoking, experimenting with alcohol. How many people remember the wine coolers? Hearing about the wine coolers? Yeah. Today we're going to learn that kids are not doing as much wine coolers. They're going into the heavy stuff. And we're going to talk about some of those heavy alcoholic beverages. And then there were those kids who were experimenting with marijuana 25 years plus ago, right? So this is not new to us. It's not new to us. The problem is what's in these drugs. And the problem is developmentally what is it doing to our young people. That's what we're very concerned about. And of course, many of our young people start experimenting with drugs, or they get their first drink a lot of time from their parents. 10, 11 years old. In my work with adolescents, one of the things I've heard parents say to me, and it was always this, well, I'd rather they stay home and drink. I could keep an eye on them. And that's really encouraging, isn't it? And we don't want to do that. And a lot of time in our families, we see a lot of alcoholism and other drug use, right? And our kids pay a lot of attention to what we're doing. And so when we look at smoking, alcohol, marijuana, and of course opioids and other drugs, there's this thing called polysubstance use. And poly means two or more, right? And so many times this age group and others and adults are moving to doing two drugs at the same time or simultaneously. And that's polysubstance use, when they truly are mixing drugs. They might mix alcohol with marijuana. They might mix methamphetamine. We know about methamphetamine. This is another one of those drugs that was made in a lab, and the high lasting from 6 to 12 hours. And again, it does so much damage to the brains and the developmental stages. And so there's a great deal of a huge increase in our adolescents starting to mix the drugs, the marijuana with other drugs, the alcohol with other drugs. And of course, you can imagine how lethal that is. And because again, you're talking about young minds, young brains developing, and you're also talking about the ability to make decisions and how it impacts the school settings, all of those things. So it's very important that when we are observing our children and people around us, we need to really pay a lot of attention to physical things, what's going on with them. How do they look? What do they say to us? What has changed about them? Anybody ever been around somebody who wasn't using drugs and they start using drugs? Anybody besides me? Oh, I'm the only one? Okay. Thank you, sweetie. And a lot of times we're around people using and we just don't say anything. But the bottom line, I'm here today to tell you that not knowing is too risky. Because when people are using drugs as a way to live and cope, the sad thing about that is it's not going to resolve the underlying issues. So when we talk about gateway drugs, and pretty much in simple terms with professional folks, we pretty much it's the drugs people start using at an early age. The four that I talked about, that's all gateway is, the beginner drugs. Alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, and now we're hearing more about opiates. But those are the drugs that kids start out with for the most part. Cigarette smoking has become even more deadly as we look at it from a vaping, and we'll talk a little bit later about vaping. We talked some last year about it, but when we talk about cigarette smoking, we have more medical problems related to the long-term effect of smoking than marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs. So we cannot keep our eyes off the radar with nicotine and what it's doing to our young people as well as those folks who are pretty addicted to it. So it's important that we know that developmentally, generally girls develop, when we're talking about the brain, pretty much up to age 18 where that brain is forming and it's maturing to look like a full adult brain. And of course, boys generally up to age 25. And of course, anything that alters that really delays the developmental stage, and it certainly alters all types of things that happen in life. And I want to, Joel did such a great interview with us, and I wish he could be here, but I'm so glad his wife is here. And he talked to us about starting out in the teen years and he talked about hanging around people they probably shouldn't have hung around. You kind of end up going with the crowd because he wanted to fit in, and then he went on to talk about, how he moved, it progressed to different stages. And I'm so proud that we have people like that in our congregation tell us what really happens, because we really need to know what happens when somebody ends up on that pathway of drug addiction. I want to, you've heard me talk about fentanyl, and we hear so much about it, and I really want our young people just to be aware of it, all of us to be aware of fentanyl and how very deadly it is. And I'm gonna try to, Matt, I might need you to help me.
You know, the #1 killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45 isn't these car crashes, it's not heart disease or murder, but accidental overdoses from fentanyl. That's according to the CDC. And today, in response to this growing epidemic, county supervisors will be discussing whether to declare illicit fentanyl a public health crisis. This would make it easier for the county to prevent fentanyl misuse and reduce its availability across the county. So we want to dive deeper into this morning. The amount of fentanyl that's actually seized last year in San Diego was enough, get this, to kill 1.4 billion people. That's according to the Regional Office of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. This public health crisis isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and parents need to be informed. So here to break down this morning is UC San Diego professor and CEO of S3 Research, Dr. Tim Mackey. Dr. Tim Mackey, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about how easily accessible fentanyl sadly is these days, particularly online.
Yeah, so most of our research focuses on social media and different internet platforms. And what we find is that fentanyl and other opioid products are readily available online, either through internet searches, through social media channels, and also through the dark web. So there's lots of ways that you can get access to this content and unfortunately get it shipped right to you.
We profiled earlier this morning the story of a father whose son thought he was taking something for antidepressant, and it was fentanyl, and he returned home and he was dead. I mean, and this, sadly, doctor, is a story a lot of families have had to deal with, right?
Absolutely. A lot of our work is possible because of these families and unfortunately their tragedies that they've experienced, where a child or a loved one was not seeking to abuse drugs, was trying to get maybe help with studying, for example, for Adderall,
right,
and took a drug and unintentionally poisoned themselves because that drug had fentanyl in it. So now we're dealing with both an opioid crisis and also a counterfeit medicines crisis, where we're having mass poisoning events.
Yeah, part of the crisis is too is how easily available this is, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
You're talking about any social media channel that the kids may be on, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, anything. These are platforms that people can go down and try to find this, right?
Absolutely, and a lot of times people may not even be looking for drugs, but they may be exposed to drug selling content because they're following hashtags that are popular among drug dealers, and they know which hashtags to use. So unfortunately, we see drug sales across all of the platforms. And a lot of our drug sellers that we look at are actually multi-platform users. So they're trying to market their services and their products across 4 or 5 platforms all at the same time. So that makes it really hard to try to shut down those sellers, because if one platform is very proactive about it, they can just pop up on another.
How did this spiral so out of control? This started in hospitals, right, and pharmaceutical companies and doctors prescribing it, right?
Absolutely.
And then how did it get to where we are today?
Well, I think we had early, a lot of the substance abuse was related to overprescribing of drugs. And when that market kind of shut down because we made it harder for people to get prescription opioids, of course, what's the easiest way to get that product later on is to go to the internet. And that's where criminals and organizations, organized crime have come in and filled that gap. And there's still a lot of demand for these drugs, and unfortunately the internet is providing that access now.
Our parents out there that want to pay very close attention to this and don't want their kids to get a hold of something like this, is there anything that they can be doing?
Absolutely. So one of the most important things we think is to understand your kids' information diet. So understand how people are consuming information, which platforms they're using, particularly why someone may be using an encrypted communication platform, and having a robust conversation about what that use is for. Second is looking for cues of when people are stressed out, like when there's finals weeks or when there's testing. That's a good time for people to initiate substance use disorder because of that stress. And also it's a good time to be looking out for these troubling signs about substance use disorder. And then the last thing is looking for packaging. A lot of the stuff is actually shipped to your door. Yeah. So understanding, not everything's an Amazon package, but there might be a package that is suspicious, so looking at that as well.
And just even just having a conversation too, those are all great points by the way, but having a conversation too, just sitting down and discussing fentanyl with your teenager or your kids and just saying like, you might take something, it may not be what you think it is, right? I mean, is that part of the dialogue as well?
Absolutely. I think, having that discussion about these drug dealers are out to poison you, and that there's a critical public safety issue that's going on right now. And you need to be aware that pills anywhere, any type of pill, could be laced with fentanyl and could poison you.
And just like that, lives are taken, and we've seen so much of that. All right, doctor, tell us a little bit about S3 research, where people can learn more before we head to break here.
Yeah, just quickly, we have a startup company that was actually created by the government, the U.S. government. Yeah. And it's putting money behind us to essentially develop technology to detect drug sellers and take them down. So we're grateful to the U.S. government for actually providing that support, and hopefully we can help a lot of different stakeholders.
And you guys are in San Diego here?
We are.
And people can get some resources from there at S3?
Absolutely.
And where can they get that information?
Just at our website at www.s-3.io.
All right, Dr. Tim Mackey, thanks for coming in. Such an important conversation for families to be having here.
So when we look at, when we think about what we just heard about fentanyl, there were some things there I always find helpful as I'm not only working in the field, but as I study and do research. He talked about strange packages coming to your home. A lot of us don't even think about that because the people who are selling these drugs, they know how to mask the drug. They sometimes will put fentanyl in eye drops, in your pills and your medication, and we just need to be aware that even the medicine we're taking, we need to make sure what we're taking as well, because again, I think the speaker is very clear, the research is out there that fentanyl is everywhere. He also talked, I was particularly excited to hear about this group because they are now trying to take down those folks who are selling these drugs to our kids and other people on the website, the dark website, and all these places where they have access to medications and how to get it to people. And if we could deal with it legally, get these jokers off the street, that would really be good. Because at the end of the day, fentanyl not only affect children and whatever type of medication drugs they're taking, but those adults who also have addictions. So anyway, I just wanted to just kind of get an overview of that, and I'm gonna do about 5 more minutes, and I'm gonna introduce our panel. They've got some great questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they share with us. And you all, I'm gonna kind of run a little bit fast through this because we certainly have this presentation on our website, and I'm encouraging you to look at it because it really has a lot of good research out there as well. And when you look at alcohol, again, one of the first drugs we hear so much about, the top 25 consumer brands were spirits, and we're talking about vodka. Isn't that heavy? That's heavy. We call it hard liquor when I was growing up because it was just so much more damaging. A great deal of our kids in the gateway drugs are now experimenting not only with vodka and some of those other hardcore alcohol, but also they are doing a lot more with beer, drinking more. And a little with the flavored alcohol beverage, we hardly ever hear the wine coolers, You know, remember they were very sweet and people liked the sweetness of it. Now our kids seem to be moving toward really getting into the really hardcore drinking. And I want you all to just take a look here at, these are the types of alcohol beverages they're drinking. Bud Light, look at that, Budweiser, vodkas, Coors Light, Jack Daniels, bourbon, Corona, Mike's, Captain Morgan's rum, and other vodkas. Those are very hardcore drugs. So clearly our kids are they're not doing the lighter drugs. Now they're going for the hardcore drugs, and again, at such an age, how damaging it is. So we need to know what they're drinking, and I don't know what's in your house or anybody's house or who your kids visit, but it's imperative you know who your kids are with and kind of some things about the parents. Because again, kids know how to get alcohol, especially if it's in the house. They know how to somehow meet people who can help them get access to it. Now, I'm aware that laws say you got to be 21, I think, to buy, alcohol and nicotine and all those. But people find a way around it, right? They find a way to get to these drugs. So I want y'all just kind of look at some of the symptoms of alcohol abuse. Slowed reaction time, blackouts. When people binge drink, they drink for days, for hours and hours at a time, and then they end up having blackouts, and they have no idea what's happened to them. And a lot of times, I saw so many of my teenage girls when I worked with adolescents where they would, be at a party and they would drink a lot and black out, and then next thing you know, they end up in some room with their clothes taken off, and they have no idea what has happened. And blackouts is a stage where you're totally out of it, and it's one of the most dangerous, riskiest parts of getting abusing alcohol. Trouble with motor coordination or inability to walk properly. You notice when the police come out, if police pull someone to the side and they suspect you might be doing alcohol or drugs, they want you to walk this straight line. Well, we know with alcohol you're not going to be able to do it, and other drugs as well. Impaired judgment, a great deal of risk-taking. And a lot of times this age group will drink and drive and lose a lot of time to car wrecks and just a great deal of problems for the people who are in the car, because sometimes the car accidents happen and they ultimately get injured, might kill someone. All these things is part of when one drinking alcohol, especially at the early age. Slurred speech, bloodshot eyes. One thing I've learned in our business, when people come to me and I'm taking a history about the use of substance abuse, I pay a lot of attention to their eyes, their skin. It tells you a lot about how long they've been using, because it really does have a lot of physical changes with the person. Lack of coordination. And so it's important if our children, and we see these signs, of course, the first thing we want to do is we want to talk to them about it. And the goal is to, if they are using, we do want to have them see a trained therapist, licensed therapist to help further assess, because children shouldn't be drinking. I get experience, but they shouldn't be drinking because it causes a lot of problems against the law, and it really, really delays the things they ought to be doing, like their schoolwork, participate in extracurricular activities, those kind of things. And when they get into drugs, they're not able to do that. And some of the behavioral parts of alcohol, the academic performance. If you've got a child who has been an AB student and all of a sudden they're making D's and F's and they're having a lot of conflict with the teacher, they're having suspension, something is going on. They start changing the friends and people they hang around. They really lose a great deal of interest in the things they used to enjoy doing. They isolate a lot. Their hygiene really deteriorate a lot. And then, of course, they're very much got this need to have money, because you got to buy these drugs, you got to buy the alcohol. So, and that's where stealing start to occur. I've heard so many kids in the journey of alcohol and drugs where they steal from their parents and anybody else, because again, they've got to buy these drugs. And then, of course, there's the whole increase in legal problems. Sometimes the beginning of gang affiliation. All these things happen. And so know that alcohol changes the whole makeup of our teenagers. And on that note, I want to ask my panelists to come up, if you will. Panelists, you know who you are: Landon, Grayson, Owen, and Tristan. And I'm gonna move past some of this because, come on, y'all, let's give them a round of applause. These are our leaders of tomorrow. Yeah. All right. But here's what I want to say. Josh, thanks so much for helping come up with these fine young people. And I'm probably more excited about what you're going to say than what I'm going to say. So let's do introductions. Say your name and what grade you're in. Let's start with you. Okay. And how old are you? Is this a perfect audience? This is the perfect audience. So panelists, you all, Tristan, I know you're moving out of high school, moving into college, and oh boy, there's a lot of drinking and drugging in college, and I know you heard about it. I want to ask you all, if you will, start out by naming 3 things you know about drugs. Landon, if you wouldn't mind telling us. Let me get your mic, Landon. They told me how to do this stuff. Thank you, sir. What are 3 things you think you know about drugs? Alcohol, marijuana, any of it? And I want you to know I already got y'all protected against your parents, whatever you say up here. I got you. You want to think about it? Okay. Come on, Grace, and help him. Yeah. What are 3 things?
Dangerous, they're somewhat common, and very addictive and hard to get off.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Not one substance goes without a consequence. A lot of times people who do or smoke marijuana think that there is no consequence, but a lot of times there is a lot more than they expect because it's a continuous use. They think that it's fine. And it is very easy to say only this drug, and then it turns into more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Once you've had it, you always have a constant need for it, even if you've stopped or become productive without it, but you always have that constant need inside of you. It's hurt a lot of people in their relationships and families, and it's torn people apart with their parents and stuff. I'm also going to go like a little history nerd thing. So the British used opium to take control of Hong Kong.
Well, I'm impressed. Landon, we got to hear, I told you, leaders of tomorrow.
Well, most people, they don't do drugs because they want to, but they do it to fit in with the crowd and other people.
Mm-hmm.
Most people also use drugs when they're younger and in middle school and high school.
Mm-hmm. I hear him whispering one more. You know something, Landon, those were so powerful, I'm willing to let you off the hook. I think you did very, very well. Thank you. Was that helpful, you all, what they're learning? Because we need to know what they're learning so we can guide them with what the facts are as well. And of course, Owen is already reading. I love it. So why do you think children, teenagers use drugs? We're not going to put it on Landon. I'm going to start on this side. There we go. Pick some. Let's give it to Owen. Yeah. Why do you think kids use drugs?
Well, mostly I think it's because of peer pressure, because like Landon and said they're trying to fit in with the crowd and not seem like they're trying to fake out on it and be cool and stuff.
Okay, very good.
I see it more like they either were exposed to it early.
Yep.
It's
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
I either see it as they were exposed to it really early, so like their parents had some type of thing with it, like smoking or drinking in the home, and they saw it and were like, oh, okay, sure, maybe someday, you know. And then, or they think no one cares, and so if it's their life, their choices, what is stopping them from like taking that step in that direction? Who cares?
Yeah.
That thought process and those horrible. Yeah. Thanks.
Very good.
So it's kind of along the lines of what they said. People want to fit in. They want to do what other people think, because
Yeah. Why do you think kids use drugs?
they think that other people that use them are cool, and that, well, I'm healthy. It's not gonna make me unhealthy. Why would it do that? Why would it do that to me? Like, why me? And I guess I don't think it would, but maybe some people will think it tastes good. It's not gonna do anything.
It
because
tastes good.
tastes
Did everybody hear that? Some people do feel that way. Yeah. All right, Landon, bring us in.
People may use drugs because they want to cope with their stress or things that are happening personally or at their houses.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of great answers here, but I'm going to refrain from comments till we get through the question, but very good. And I want to, if Landon, if you'll let me have that mic back, I'm going to pass it to Tristan and let her start this third question. Does peer pressure influence kids to use, and why do you think so?
Definitely. I mean, a lot of times when you're in a crowd like that already that is using drugs and alcohol, not only does it look like it's not doing anything to them, I mean, they're going to wake up at 6 a.m. the next day, go to work, do just fine, you know? So you think, well, they can do it, so I can. Or it can be an and/or. I mean, they are hurting too, and they seem to be perfectly fine when they're using. So you want like that kind of peace too, and it's just a fake escape. So yeah, I think peer pressure definitely.
Let's do Owen. Thank you.
I do indeed think that peer pressure does influence drugs because people don't want to seem like they don't fit in, and they want to get with the right people so that they can become cooler in a sense. And totem pole of school and higher up and stuff.
Very good. Let's pass it to Grayson.
I do think that it influences youth decision. Just, again, kind of what they're saying. He's cool, he does it. Why not me? Let me do it.
No, example, right. What do you think, Landon?
I think it does take, that's part of drug use. Because they want to fit in with everybody, and they don't want to be by themselves and just being themselves. They want to be like everyone else.
And want to identify, with certain people. Very good, very good. So I clearly hear all of y'all saying, yeah, peer pressure has a lot of influence on why kids use drugs. I got news for you. Peer pressure also has a lot of influence on adults' use and continued use. This thing about fitting in, this thing about avoiding pain, like many of you talked about. Now, I know in your homes, your parents guide and give you rules and chores and all those things that you're supposed to do right as a person in your home. I want you all to, as we kind of wrap up with your question, what advice do you all give to your parents about drugs? What do parents need to know about drugs that could help anybody using drugs? Owen, let me start with Owen, I think. What advice would you give parents about drug use that could help them?
I think you should make sure that you know who your child is friends with. Make sure you know who their parents are. And
now, if something else come up on, let me know. We'll give the mic back now. Okay? Did y'all hear that? You need to know who your kids are hanging out with. Okay.
Another thing is like, it just left. Oh, okay. So I heard this before, and I'm sure that anybody who's ever dealt with somebody who's an addict or has dealt with addiction, that you can't trust them. Like, a lot of times, especially when it gets bad, there will be more secrets, and there will be more things to hide, and they're just trying to get more opportunities. And then it is a really big deal that you know the parents. Like, sometimes, I know for my mom, when I was younger, she had to know the parents of the kids that I was with, and that was a big deal for her. And if she didn't know them, they were only allowed to come and spend the night at my house, because we were safe and she knew that. And I didn't know things about like some of my friends' parents, and it was just like, as I got older and they told me things, I was like, no wonder I wasn't able to go over there. Your kids are not gonna understand a lot of things that you do to protect them, and sometimes, like, I don't know, I think I'm going on a tangent, so I'm just gonna take go.
That's good. So parents need to be parents, and they don't have to always understand them. They need to protect their kids. I think that's what I hear you saying. Okay, very good.
Similar to like knowing who their friends are and who their friends' parents are, they need to know what they're doing on their phones, and if you must, you should limit or restrict social media. And if you're really worried, or just in case, you could go through messages of who your child is talking to make sure they're not talking with anybody about this, or how to get things, or things like that.
Now, I didn't tell Grayson to say that either. I'm just saying, but spot on. All right, Len, what do you think?
I would advise parents to know the symptoms of drugs and like how it can affect their child, so they can tell if their child is using drugs, or like Grayson said, limit social media and go through messages and stuff to see where they're getting them, if they're getting them, and just stuff like that. They should also know like where they're going and where they've been and stuff like that.
Let's give this group a round of applause. Final question. Do you feel comfortable talking with your parents? Grace said, I don't see the question. This is the final question. Do you feel comfortable talking with your parents about drugs or anything or some things? All right, Owen, what do you think?
yes.
Okay. I should tell them, explain, shouldn't I put no? That's good, that's good. That's good, you good, Owen.
Wait, so like asking them questions about the
Do you feel comfortable talking with them about drugs, different things in general? And I'm really getting at, how do you communicate, talk to your parents is what I'm really getting at. Do you feel that you're able to do that?
Yeah. It is a goal, I feel like, especially for my grandparents, to be very open about those things, and
because I don't feel like it'd be very smart to do anything like that. So I wouldn't.
That's fantastic. Landon, that's a tough one.
I don't have a problem keeping anything from them or talking to them about drugs and stuff.
That pretty much.
Because
And on that note, I will take Landon for what he said. But thank you all so much. And I want to, as a wrap, I want to say thanks so much to each of you for being a part of this. We value you and your contribution to this church, to your community. This is a little token from Miss Lucy. God, you know you're old. And this is for Grayson. Do y'all like your colors? Okay, good. I try to get sporty colors. So let's give them a round of applause and thank you all so much for being a part of this. Appreciate you all. Didn't they do well? These are our leaders of today and tomorrow, aren't they? Parents, let's give these kids a round of applause. They spoke very highly. They said all the things. I believe them when they talk about their relationships with their families and about what they see around them. And you all, one of the things we got to do is sit down and listen to our kids and let them tell us what's going on in their lives. And I'm sure you all do that. And I'm going to, for the sake of time, I know we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to kind of run through these symptoms. We talked some about alcohol abuse, because I want to spend the latter part of this training. I know we're getting near the end. And anyway, look at the symptoms, you all. Nicotine, a great deal of the notion of problem sleeping, irritability, increasing appetite, all of that. And then look, a lot of times when people are smoking, there's that weight gain that could start to come in effect as well. And because of the nicotine, it affects the brains, and when once that chemical hit the brains, they feel this euphoric high feeling. They feel this good feeling about things. And of course, cigarette smoking is what we did back in our day. Some of us tried back in our day. Now we move more to the whole vaping. And we talked some last year about the e-cigarettes and how dangerous those are, and they have chemicals. And the reason vaping is so popular because it's liquid and it goes straight to it. It moves from a regular cigarette smoke into a liquid vapor, and it really, the high is quicker, and ultimately it leads to people getting that head rush and feeling good. And just know that if your child is smoking, or a child smoking cigarettes, know that cigarette smoking also has a great deal of effect on the brain and mind, and of course, over a period of time, I've seen high school kids smoking cigarettes, and ultimately what end up happening is when they used to do physical education, they have a lot of shortness of breath, and they have chest pains. The more chronic, the more frequent they use cigarettes. Sometimes nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, all of those things come with people who are vaping. And these are just some of some vaping types of equipment that kids use, and adults. And of course, marijuana, you see all of the signs there: bloodshot eyes, lack of motivation, slow reaction, all of those. And the good news, this training will be on our website. And if you notice here, this is how marijuana looked years and years ago, some now because it's more organic and made, it's planted. And now we got the alcohol, the marijuana that's got a medication or got liquids in it. And we've heard about legalizing marijuana, and that's a whole nother conversation. And yes, legalization of marijuana does help with some medical conditions like seizure disorders when we think about marijuana use, but we've still got a lot of people who use marijuana because of the good feeling they get from it. And as you all heard me say it earlier, the marijuana now has a great deal of fentanyl in it, a great deal of other very poisonous chemicals that make it more addictive. And ultimately, people who used to look a certain way that they came into us with marijuana now look like they got schizophrenia or some type of serious mental illness where they're hallucinating, hearing voices, seeing things, those kind of things. And so again, these are some of the signs: anxiety, panic attacks, rapid breathing, low blood pressure, intense paranoia, hallucinations. These are some things. And the goal is that, and I think Landon said, is that parents got to be educated. You know, when we're talking to our kids, we need to know what we're talking about, and we need to give them accurate information. And when we look at marijuana, again, it has a great deal of effect on high school kids and you know, how they do in school. And people used to say marijuana was not addictive. The fact is marijuana is very addictive. And a lot of time when people get addicted to marijuana, they have some of the same issues as somebody who has been on methamphetamine, cocaine, or other opioids. So again, just want you to, this is weed, and this is dapping, D-A-P-P-I-N-G, and that's when marijuana is converted over into a tube. It becomes in liquid form, and again, people like to use marijuana with the tube because you can get the high a lot quicker. The liquid form causes one to get a quicker high. And the person who is very addicted to drugs, that's what they want. Now, when they're smoking weed, it takes longer, but if it's in liquid form, the high is a lot quicker. So the thrust of this is not only, and I really believe if we look at this particular material, it's a great jumping point on what we need to be saying when we have the conversation with our kids about drugs. And as you can tell, drugs affect all of our families. And so when we think about having the conversation with kids, and I want to wrap up with just talking about some things we need to do, a lot of times society would lead us to believe as parents that we're not the biggest influence in our children's lives as parents, and that's not true. We have a great deal of research that clearly point that parents have a great deal of influence in our kids' lives. And I think sometimes when our kids get older, we don't think they hear us. But in actuality, when you look at them, when they're teenagers and when they're later, you'll realize that they heard a lot of what you're saying and probably actually did a lot of the things you want them to do. So we got to get out of this notion that peers are more powerful than what parents can say. And I'm not saying peer pressure isn't powerful, but as parents, if we're giving our kids the right information and we're supportive of them, and letting them know the danger of the drug, it's very helpful, and I want you to hear this. And I wanted to quote this particular person. She says, "Mean what you say. If you tell a child 10, you can tell me anything, and I promise I won't get mad at you. Stand by." You know, it takes a lot to say to your, for you to say to your kid, "I'm going to hear whatever you say. I'm not going to judge you. I'm just going to just listen because I want to know more about you." And for me, that's kind of hard to follow because it depends on what it is, okay? I'm just saying, okay? I appreciate open. So when we think about us as power as parents, it's important that when we're talking to our kids, it's some general things. We need to be upfront about our family's history of drug use. Now, I'm not talking about a long, extensive step-by-step of what they use, how to use, but they need to know what those whatever drugs of choice that's been in your family, my family. In my family, it's alcohol. Alcohol is has been a thing in my family, and I know there are some family members who tried marijuana and heroin. Okay, and it's not to be ashamed; it's to just let people know that when you got families who are addicted to alcohol and drugs, there's some genetic things going on there too, and we need to be aware. We need to be aware of what's going on in our family. And you know, when I was growing up, people would not tell you anything. It was just this secret thing about Uncle Leroy. Everybody knew he disappeared, don't know what he was doing, and nobody would tell you that he had a serious drug problem. And we've got to be more transparent because our kids are very smart. They know. So talking about family history of drugs. Second, avoid scare tactics and be honest with your teens about drugs. You know, to say that drugs that there's no taste, it don't feel good, is that really honest? A lot of people would tell you that they like the taste or they like the feeling of the use of a drug. But anyway, whatever you say to them, don't try to frighten them into, I don't know if you all remember the movie Scared Straight. They take these kids in high school, they were doing delinquent activities, they would send them to prison, and they would meet all these folks who were, you know, had done a lot of things in their teen years, and the goal was to scare them straight so they wouldn't end up in prison. Now, did that work for some people? Probably. But a lot of times scare tactic does not work. Keeping the lines of communication open. I really appreciate our young people saying that they felt comfortable with their parents. So parents, whatever you're doing, please continue to do that. They trust you, and that's who you want them to trust. And Josh, I think if we get somebody to pass out those handouts. And y'all, these are 5 conversational goals that we need to have with our children. We need to show that we disapprove of any drinking and experimentation. You know, we do too much dancing around, being politically correct. We need to say, no, I don't want you using drugs because they're dangerous. They affect your brains, they affect your relationships, and they affect your long-range goals, short-range goals. Being very transparent. Show you care about your team's health and wellness. You know, make sure that they're involved in activities and that you are always being a part of whatever they're doing. And as our team said earlier, you need to know who your kids are with and really what they're doing. Very important. Show you a good source of information about alcohol and drugs. You can't talk to people about something if you don't know, okay? Please invest in educating. That's why we're doing these seminars, because we want people to be well informed of what the signs and symptoms are and what to look for, and also where to get help. Very, very important. Show you're paying attention and that you discourage risky type behavior. When kids are hanging out with people who are cutting class and they're getting in trouble with school and they're doing illegal things, and you're saying, I'm just hanging out with them, not good practice. Not good practice at all. It's important. Build your team's skills and strategies for avoiding drinking and drug use. So those are kind of the 5 major things I want to talk about. But there's some do's and don'ts when we get ready to have the conversation, and I want to wrap up with this. You come out of the gate, drugs and alcohol will damage your health and your brains. It just will. Okay? And we need to be very clean and straightforward about it. And things I want you to remember when you talk to them is about the signs and symptoms of drugs. You want to plan that meeting. You don't plan it when it's a school night or something is going on. And plan a particular time you want to sit down and talk with your teen, a time when you think, you know, we all have those timelines where we have sometimes I'm a better morning or night person. Find out whatever time that works good for them when you're going to get their undivided attention. So you want to be educated on what the signs and symptoms are of those gateway drugs, and you all got the list there. Please use them. And then you want to make sure that you are respectful of the timeline you give them. Mark, I've been watching the news. There's so much going on with drugs and overdose. And I get very worried because I know according to research, a great deal of teenagers experiment with marijuana, alcohol, and sometimes they start prescription drugs. And I really want to talk to you about it because I have learned so much in my research and people I know, and I want to share that with you. And we don't want to preach at people, right? And, you know, not that preaching is bad, but we want to give people the facts and share where you get your information from. Again, if you don't know what you're talking about your kids, they're going to know you don't know what you're talking about. And also when you're planning this meeting, if both partners could be there, that's the best way. Find a place in your home where it's very private and the younger children can't come in and interrupt. Okay? So we're setting up the scene. And of course, we don't want any televisions or phones or internet in there, right? We want undivided attention. So setting up a time, picking an area within the house where you can have complete privacy, as much as possible. Both parents need to be in there together, educated, because both parents need to be on the same note. If you got one parent don't know what the other parent has said during these meetings, it's going to cause conflicts. The kids are very good. They know how to make things work in their favor. And this thing called war on drugs, everybody, the adults need to know what's going on and work together with each other. So in that first meeting, you really want to talk about the symptoms like we've done, marijuana, cocaine, all those drugs. Talk about, and just do some of the symptoms of, and then let them know what happens when they use drugs on a regular basis. That whole overdosing that we talk about, and how they could lead to heart problems, they could lead to death, it could lead to drinking and driving while they're under influence, could kill someone, right? And while you're educating them, you want to pause in between to ask them their opinions. Hey, Joe, I just told you about the number of fatalities in the state of Georgia is 35% for adolescents, and then give them a number. What do you think of that? Get their input. Have you heard of any of these kind of things going on at your school? Because what you want to do, you want to get them to the point where you're engaging and they're engaging, right? So you want to make sure that you want to hear what they have to say. And because they don't say anything, that's okay. That may very well mean that they're really listening to what you're saying, and they're very much into trying to conceptualize it. And talk about social media. Some of our young people talk about social media. Social media has a great deal of influence on it, on our kids, on us. And monitoring, I love what our young people said. We're not paying attention to our kids and what they're watching and what they're doing with the TikTok accounts and all. You all know what I'm talking about, all these different social media websites. And that's where a lot of times people are getting a hold to the, that's where these drug dealers are going. Because they know where what platforms kids use a lot. And they know how to make dangerous drugs look like they're just a piece of candy. And if we don't know what platforms they're using, and we're not putting the limits around it, we're going to miss a whole lot, because that's how people are doing everything through the internet, it seems. And when they ask you, well, so Ma, did you ever smoke? Ma, did you ever use drugs? What do you say? Be honest. Be honest. Yes, I had a few mixed drinks in college. I sure did. Now, I was afraid to get drunk because I didn't trust people, but I sure did. I drank some, and guess what, folks? It tastes good. Okay? It tastes good. And thank goodness, because I had seen in my own family, my own father's drinking, that left me with a really bad, I don't want to ever be like that. And thank God he got to a point where he didn't need the drugs anymore, or the alcohol, and, life got so much better for us as a family. It's important that we not be judgmental. People say church people are some of the most judgmental people that they know. Okay, I've seen a lot of church people very judgmental. Okay, and when we start to be judgmental of people, people get uncomfortable with that. They don't know what to do with it. Judgmental is about listening, understanding, and giving people the facts, and letting them know that you don't approve of the drug. And the notion of you're a bad person and all that, we want to stay away from that. And of course, all of these the last two here, we've been talking about those. Please know that you have to continue to get education on the signs and symptoms of drug use. And please know that you've got to have the conversation more than one time with your children. Very, very important. So we're going to plan, right? We're going to plan. We're going to meet with our kids. We're going to make sure we got some knowledge about these gateway drugs, right? And we're going to try to do it as a family, right? And then we're gonna, when they ask us questions, we're gonna be as transparent as we can be. And please don't give them a dissertation about your drug use. Just say, yeah, I use and I tried a little bit. Keep it moving. You know, don't overdo it, okay? And then tell them what happened when you did it and some of the consequences. We hope some of the negative consequences, right? Okay. And it's normal to be curious. We need to say that to our kids. It's normal to be curious. And curiosity doesn't mean you have to try something just to get a good feel for it. Okay. And you all, I'm gonna pass these on. Why is alcohol bad for me? I got invited to a party. Can I go? We need to be having a conversation when kids start going to parties. We need to be very clear, you know, who they're going with and what they're gonna be doing there. And if you can, chaperone. That'll help it a lot. And again, these are just some things to think about. And as we wrap up today, these are a lot of great resources in this presentation, and I'm saying use it. If your children are experimenting with alcohol, they're doing a lot of nicotine, smoking nicotine called marijuana, alcohol and nicotine just go hand in hand with this age group, please consider having them assessed by a professional counselor like me, okay? Because it is not normal to have kids experimenting with different types of drugs because we know there's a lot of physical and psychological damage, and we also know that it really, really ruins a lot of relationships and it interferes with goals. And at this point, I will sign off for today, but do know that, yes, I do these trainings, and if you ever need some help with any resources around, it doesn't have to be anybody in this church family. It could be people you know. I do pretty good with being a referral for people and helping linking people to the right resource. And I think that ends it for today, and I wanted to bring up our guests. Y'all come on up. If we could just have a few minutes, because we have our guests who we're going to talk about some other services in the community. Okay. So as I get our colleague, our friend here, any questions about, is this helpful in terms of just kind of how to get it going with your kids? Okay, thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Jennifer Lindquist, and my husband and I work at a ministry in Lawrenceville called Across the Bridge, and it's an addiction ministry. Some of you have heard of it already. We were here last year and we spoke. We are a ministry that offers help with addiction from a faith-based perspective. So we have meetings 7 days a week. We do have sanctioned meetings such as AA, NA, and CA, things of that nature. But the other meetings that we have are all faith-based meetings. And we also offer help for people who have family members or themselves or children that are suffering from addiction. You can call us at any point. We are partnered with most of the rehabs in the state of Georgia and can help you find a place to get yourself or your loved one help that fits specifically to your needs. Just so you guys are aware, the last statistics for Gwinnett County were put out on July 19th of this year, and from the 1st of July to July 19th, there were 41 opiate overdoses. And I have, my husband and I are both recovering addicts, and we collectively have 6 children. And so we talk very much in our house about, the effects of drugs and alcohol. We are very honest about the things that we have endured. And it does help and it does benefit us greatly, and I think it benefits our kids greatly. I have a 14-year-old at the bottom of the stack, and there are definitely opiates and prescription pills in our middle schools and in our high schools. Talk to your kids about things, even if they aren't obvious. Just if your kids are hanging out with kids that look bad, it doesn't always mean that they're doing something. If your kids are constantly trying to get good grades or stay occupied in school and in sports and trying to get ahead, there's probably kids offering them Adderall that they've gotten at home. There's anything is possible. It's not always obvious. Be honest, but don't be afraid. God's got to fill that hole. We know that that's true. It's the only way to fix it. And you can't be fearful of what it looks like. You have to trust them if you want them to trust you. And just know that it's possible anywhere. It doesn't have to look like anything in particular. At this stage in the game, it can look like anything. So just be open-minded to that and be willing to listen. If they have things that they're suffering from and they need to talk about it, listen to them. It doesn't have to just be related to drugs and alcohol. If there's old things that have not been fixed, get them some help and some therapy so that they can work on it before things like drugs and alcohol become a problem. It can just take one time of somebody saying, hey, do you want this to make you feel better, to run faster, to work harder, to do any of those things? And it can be fentanyl. Fentanyl does look like candy. It does. I just sent out a chain text to all 6 of my kids the other day, ranging from 24 down to 14, and I said, hey guys, this is a picture of fentanyl, and it looked like a Smartie. Don't touch it. And they all said, got it, Mom. You know, I mean, and that's it. Like, you just have to be honest. And if you yourself have suffered from alcohol or addiction, or you have someone in your family that has, or you have a friend that has, have them talk to your kids about what that looks like. Don't be afraid of it. Be honest about it. Because I'll tell you, I believe in my house, and I'm not naive, any of my children could fall into the grips of addiction, unfortunately. Could happen to anyone. But I do believe that knowing firsthand what that looks like and that it can be overcome is a blessing that benefits my children and can benefit yours if they have not yet encountered what that looks like. And let them know also that if they're not dealing with it, that you have a safe place for people that they know are dealing with it in their home or themselves. So even if your child is not suffering and would not worry or be concerned that they would do it themselves, let them know that your house is a safe place for their friends to come if you find out that they are. And that will open another door of trust for them to let you know that, them to know that they can trust you. So just some tips as a parent and from our place. But I have some business cards, and like I said, we are available all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can come to our place. You can call us. We offer resources and help. We also offer therapy there for people that are suffering from addiction and abuse of any kind. And we love helping, and we're happy to be part of this community. So thank you very much for letting me share.
Thank you so much for that information. On that note, that ends today. I didn't see any hands raising for any questions, but thanks so much for all that you do, and ditto to everything you said is so true. So let's keep getting educated and learning more and educating our children so we can have a safer community. So on that note, thank you all for being here today. Have a good week, and I'll talk to you later. Josh, did you have any?
Thank you, Lucy. Give Lucy a hand, please, for all that she shared. So I appreciate her expertise and her willingness to do this and her time it takes to put this together and do this for us. So the information that she shared, we are going to put it on our website. It will be available, so if you want to get any of this, the PowerPoint, we'll have that up. I'll put that up this week, and it'll be accessed on there, and so you can look at that. Again, if you know anyone, if you know anyone that might be struggling with addiction, I know there are resources like Across the Bridge that want to help out. I mean, these are people that they know what it's like to go through it. They know that there are people out there that need it, so make sure you contact them or any number of the resources that we have around here. So I want to just finish this out with a prayer, if you would. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to be here, to be a part of this, to spend this time learning about addiction and the things that to look out for. For those of us who are parents, I know this is very useful information. It's things that we do worry about, and I pray, Lord, that you would bless Lucy and all that she's doing in order to get this information out to those who need it. Lord, we thank you so much for her willingness to share these things with us today, and to all those who came here to spend their afternoon coming here to support this effort and also to get this information so that we can know how to talk to our kids about addiction and about drugs and alcohol and the signs of that and how to avoid it. And we thank you so much for that. Thank you. I pray that you would just help us as we continue to try to raise young people, that we would do what's best for them and try to lead them on the best path, the path that you set out for them. And help them, Lord, to be able to rely on you and to be able to turn to you instead of turning to outside sources, instead of turning to drugs and other things that they feel will fill that void. Help us to realize that you're the only one that can fill it. And we ask all these things in your Son's name. Amen.